Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be going over GLC, specifically the trainers in GLC, which are obviously very important. Obviously, a GLC deck is defined first generally by its Pokemon, but the trainers are very important, and the trainers are cards that are universal across all the decks as well. I'm not going to be talking about type-specific trainers in today's video. Most of them are really straightforward. If they are good in a type, they're usually just like objectively better than other cards you'd already want to be putting in, so you just put them in because they're good, or they're like really niche and bad and you don't play them. But with the trainers, it's a lot more interesting, or the ones that can go in any type of deck, and I'm going to be going over all the ones that you can play in Pokemon TCG Live that aren't in standard. The ones you can't play in live, you can't really play them. You can play them in full GLC. There's also not that many. There is some, and I actually talked about them in a separate video. I think it was 2 weeks ago. But then the ones in standard, I'm not going to go over because, most people are pretty familiar with them compared to these, which most people watching this probably have very little idea about these just in general. And also how they work in standard is pretty similar to how they work in GLC. It's not like there's anything crazy going on there. But if people want me to make a separate video on that, I could make that. But let's just hop right in, starting with the tools in the stadiums. Unsurprisingly, there's not as much stuff to talk about. What tools we have. And by the way, I got this list of cards. I kind of looked through it and picked out a few that I thought didn't belong there and added some. But generally, I got the most played ones in GLC from Limitless. So that's where this is coming from. But there's a few different types of tools. First of all, we have a skateboard, U-turn board, and air balloon. They all are retreat helping tools. We have a skateboard and U-turn board reducing it by 1 colorless, air balloon reducing it by 2. Especially Pokemon TCG Live, we can't play Floatstone. These are really important. Of course, we can play regular switching as well, and we'll talk about that some a little bit later. But these cards are really good. U-turn board gets bounced back to your hand instead of getting discarded, which can be really nice, but also, is one enough? Maybe. Air balloon is probably the go-to in my opinion, though obviously if you only need to retreat one, then use U-turn board, and then escape board is it's fine as well. Escape board is allows you to retreat if you're asleep or paralyzed, which is like cool, I guess. Sometimes it's really useful. It's generally niche, but definitely one that you could be playing as well. And then there are HP boosting tools, or like survival tools. Pot helmet, you take 30 less damage, and cape of toughness basics get 50 more HP. Cape of toughness is the same as bravery charm in GLC, and then and even in standard for a while that was actually the same. And then pot helmet, they're reducing cards as well. There's also luxurious cape, so there are a bunch of different options. Pot helmet's probably a little niche. Cape of toughness obviously not going in everything, and you already do have bravery charm as well, so you could play 2 copies of that if you want. Good for big tanky basics, which some decks, if you're looking at like colorless or fighting, those play a bunch of big basics, so it's probably good in something like that. Though it can certainly be good in other types as well. Then Wishful Baton. This is a pretty interesting tool card here. It says if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active and knocked out by damage, then you move up to 3 energy cards from one of your Pokemon, or from that Pokemon that was just knocked out to one of your bench Pokemon. So you keep the energy on the board, which is really nice, I guess. It kind of depends, though, on the situation that you're in. A lot of the time, you can have, if you have a lot of energy on your active anyways, then you probably are accelerating it and recovering it relatively easily. So it's not the biggest deal, but it can be nice in some situations. You can kind of set it up for certain combos. This is, again, not the most universal of these cards, but it's a tool to kind of keep in mind and consider. Then the next set of cards we have are the stadiums. Stadiums are also, I'd say I don't know, I was going to say they're more important than the tools. I'm not really sure where they stand next to the tools, but they're definitely less important than the items and supporters, of course, but there are still some that are pretty important here. First of all, Viridian Forest, and I'll also include Training Court, talk about these together. They get energies. Training Court gets it from the discard to your hand. Then Viridian Forest, you discard a card from your hand, then search your deck for a basic energy. These are both pretty good to give you consistent access to energy. They can have certain synergies as well that are particularly nice, but they're, solid in a lot of different decks and definitely cards worth including. These are also active stadiums as opposed to Lost City's a passive stadium, but there's, a lot of stadiums that do like stat buffs and relatively simple things. Viridian Forest and Training Court, there are 2 pretty powerful stadiums that can actually let you do something. Lost City is actually a really interesting stadium as well. Honestly, one of the, in my opinion, most powerful, but I mean, it's really unique because obviously in GLC, you can only have 1 copy of every card, 1 copy of every Pokemon. And so at that point, then if it's knocked out, you can recover it, but with Lost City, it gets sent to the Lost Zone instead. So it allows you to make sure that your opponent won't ever be able to play another one of that Pokemon again, unless they have two Pokemon that are very, very similar. But even then, you're getting rid of one of them. So Lost City is really powerful, but it's something you have to be very careful with. A lot of times or sometimes it doesn't matter either. So it's a really interesting stadium. I play some GLC. I don't play it like a ton all the time. So I think this is definitely a card that I need to get used to a little more and know exactly when to use, but it can be really, really strong. Then we have Pokestop and Rose Tower. These are like draw stadiums. Rose Tower is definitely weaker than Pokestop in terms of how many cards it's drawing. Most likely draws till you have three. Pokestop mills the top three and gets the items back there. Pokestop's more aggressive. But it's has a higher downside as well. I said Rose Tower is stronger, not as necessarily better. Or no, sorry, Rose Tower is not as strong. It doesn't mean it's worse, but it means that it isn't necessarily you're not seeing as many cards. It's definitely less aggressive, more of something that can fill your hand up at a few situations. You might have some synergies with it, like say Squovet or some like a lot of discard, or something like that. So Rose Tower is like solid. There's also certain like supports and stuff like that. I think Chaotic Swell. Chaotic Swell is I don't know if it's really interesting, but it's a very solid stadium. It's probably the generic neutral stadium. If you are looking for a stadium bump, it's Chaotic Swell. It's when it's in play, when your opponent plays a stadium to bump it, that stadium also gets discarded. So it bumps essentially two stadiums. The one that you bump using Chaotic Swell, like if your opponent has one in play, you play Chaotic Swell to, of course, remove it. Any stadium does that. But then they need to either get rid of Chaotic Swell some other way before playing the next one, or like sacrifice a stadium to it. So it can be really good. In some situations, a lot of times your opponent can kind of play around it, but it's a little awkward for them to do so. It's pretty solid. And again, if you're looking for something that's not going to help your opponent and hurt them a little bit, this is the stadium. Moving on though to the item cards. The first set of item cards are the ball search cards. There are some of these in standard, and they're good to get like Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, and like Buddy Buddy Poffin. Ball search is generally the term. Usually the cards are like something ball. They search for Pokemon out of your deck, but also Battle VIP Pass and Evolution Incense do that. Battle VIP Pass, turn one going first or second. You can search for two basics, put them onto your bench, so it's like double Nest Ball. But only turn one. I'm actually not a big fan of this card, but some people really like it. Quick Ball gets any basic from your deck into your hand, but you need to discard a card from your hand. It's a very good card, though. Level Ball is a Pokemon with 90 HP or less of any stage, so it's better than Buddy Buddy Poffin because you can get evolutions, but obviously, it's different, but it can do some things it can't. The other can't. And then Timer Ball gets you do a double coin flip, and you get an evolution per heads. Versus Evolution Incense just gets an evolution Pokemon, and then Hisuian Heavy Ball. This isn't really a ball search card, but kind of is. It's a something ball, right? So it lets you look at your face down prizes, and you can reveal a basic Pokemon you find there, and put into your hand, and send Hisuian Heavy Ball back into your prizes. This is a really, really solid item card for getting stuff out of your prizes. What are you going to have in your prizes? Who knows? It's all kind of random, but Hisuian Heavy Ball can kind of remove some of that randomness, but also in the early game, it can be used to get yourself a basic Pokemon into your hand as well. Not necessarily one exactly of your choosing, but it is pretty nice. Definitely a card that I would highly recommend in almost any GLC deck. I definitely recommend Quick Ball in every GLC deck, but Hisuian Heavy Ball is also really good. Most of these are really good. Timer Balls, coin flips are kind of sketchy, but still very good. And Battle VIP passes. These are just very good. Ball search cards are really fundamental to the format. There's a limited amount, and you pretty much play almost all of them in most decks. It obviously kind of depends. And then again, I mentioned earlier, there are type-specific cards. For example, Dive Ball is like objectively better than these, but just for water. And there are cards like that, but these are very good cards you want to be playing in most decks, and there are some more, again, from this larger card pool. Then the next set of cards are other items. These are item like setup cards that are like draw or search that aren't ball search cards. So we have trekking shoes and acro bike. Trekking shoes, you look at the top one, then discard it, and then draw the next one, or just draw the first one. And then acro bike lets you look at the top two. You discard one, put the other into your hand. So really, you kind of sift through your deck a little bit, draw some, discard some. They're not insane, but they're pretty solid. Not really ever bad in a deck. Then there's also Adventure Bag to get tools, and that's like cool, I guess. It's not insanely strong, but it can be nice in some decks. Stadium Nav is similar. You do a double coin flip, and you get a stadium for each head. So if you have a stadium heavy deck, then Stadium Nav can be good. Or if you have one major focus stadium, again, can it be very good. Then there's also Tag Call. Tag Call is a really interesting item card here letting you search for 2 tag team cards. Most tag team cards are tag team GX Pokemon, which you can't play. I don't think you can play in live. I'm pretty sure you should not be able to. But the game might be glitched, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Regardless, there are a few tag team supporters. I believe there's a total of 7. Most of them are pretty bad, but there's 3 that are good, and I will be going over them. And tag call, if you're playing 2 of them, probably then you can play tag call. If you're just playing 1, it seems pretty bad, and it's good to have 3, honestly. They're all pretty decent, and I believe those are the only 3 that you can realistically play. I'm going through them in my head, and I think I'm forgetting one. There's no, realistically, there's 3 that are pretty good in most decks, and the rest are pretty niche. But these cards aren't necessarily cards you have to include. They make the deck a little bit better. And a standard example is kind of like Pokegear. Pokegear is like okay in GLC. It's pretty good. There's also Trainer's Mail for pre-live era GLC. So overall, these are solid inclusions. Some people like some of these a lot, and then if you do, then play them, but don't feel obligated to. Outside of, I guess, Tag Call, if you're playing a bunch of tag team supporters, Tag Call is really good. Then there's also item recovery cards. There are some other recovery cards, but most of them are items. In my opinion, the best ones are items. You have Ordinary Rod, which is pretty similar to Super Rod. Rescue Stretcher, which can get Pokemon back. Rescue Carrier can also get Pokemon back with any 90 HP or less, but it's a little stronger than Rescue Stretcher. In general, Inline's Fishing Rod gets a Pokemon and a tool back. It's one of the ways to recover tools, and it's like pretty solid. Not too much to say about these cards because, they are just cards that are going to allow you to get your cards back, and there are some, of course, in standard as well, like Night Stretcher and Super Rod, and then there are some that are like supporters, but just going over the items for now. And again, you probably want a handful of these in your deck. Probably like 1 Rod card is pretty common. Rescue Stretcher is definitely one that's going in most decks, and then you kind of need to decide if the others are what you want. Then we have the utility items. These are the ones that don't really go with the others. Some are really normal, some are really weird. We have Escape Rope, Scoop Up Net, and Switch Cart. Escape Rope is, I think, the general Switch card played in decks. You could play regular Switch. Escape Rope is Switch, but your opponent also has to Switch, so it's usually a little bit better. Or I don't know if it usually is. Usually it's like similar power level to Switch, but then there are times when it's a lot better. So it's generally the better card over Switch to have in your deck. You could certainly be playing both. Switch card is a Switch, but it only switches basics, but then it heals 30 from the Pokemon. So if you're only or mostly running basics, then play Switch card. Scoop Up Net is personally one of my favorite cards in GLC because it lets you put a Pokemon, any Pokemon essentially. There are cards you can't, but they're not in the format. So you put a Pokemon into your hand, and then you discard the attached cards. But if it's an evolution, you keep all the Pokemon there. And then you, of course, if it's stuck in the active, it's now out of the active. It's out of play completely. It also gets rid of the damage. It also allows you to replay it down so that you can retrigger abilities. Scoop Up Net is a really good card I'd recommend in most decks, and same thing with Escape Rope. Scoop Up Net is a little more niche, but again, I feel like it's almost always good. I don't know if I'd say niche, but like if you're using it as just a switch, you devolve it completely and then also remove all the energies and like tools and stuff, so that could be really bad. But it is a card that's in my opinion good in almost every deck. Then Field Blower and Lost Vacuum. Field Blower, in my opinion, is like just kind of like a better Lost Vacuum, unless you're playing a Lost Zone base deck, which isn't super common. Field Blower discards 2 in any combination of Pokemon tools and stadium cards in play, and Lost Vacuum Lost Zones a tool over stadium in play. And then Lost Vacuum also Lost Zones another card from your hand. They can both get rid of your own cards if you want, which probably doesn't come up. It can, though. I've done it. But anyways, that's like cool. But they're disruptive cards. They're, again, pretty similar. I don't really see both of them played almost ever. But if you want to, you could, if you're really worried about something. Field Blower, again, is probably the general one that's a little bit better. But Lost Vacuum does, Lost Zone the cards, and there are ways to recover stadiums or tools. So if your opponent has one that's really important and really like crucial to their game plan that they need to keep, and then they're like, oh, if they Field Blower it, I'll just get it back. Well, Lost Vacuum will stop that. And then again, of course, as I said, if you're playing a Lost Zone based deck, then you want to be playing Lost Vacuum. Although, as I said, they are also pretty uncommon, but they are both, or at least one is probably a nice card to have. Lost Vacuum also does remove a card from your hand, which could be nice. Then we have some really weird items here. You have Reset Stamp, where your opponent shuffles their hand to their deck, then draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards. It's a pretty disruptive item. Honestly, I don't see it that much in GLC, but it can be pretty strong. Or not. If your opponent has an established engine on the board, it's probably not super great. depending on the engine. Then you have Echoing Horn, putting a basic from your opponent's discard onto their bench. It's also a rapid strike card, which is cool. I guess it doesn't really matter that much, but Echoing Horn allows you to do a few different things. It allows you to get an opponent's Pokemon onto their board, which then you can knock out. It can also allow you to kind of go after that Pokemon and trap it to buy some time, and it's mostly there to bring a Pokemon back to be knocked out, because trapping Pokemon in the active in GLC is generally much worse than it is in Standard, where it is like a legitimate deck build around game winning strategy. It's not really that in GLC, but again, it's mostly used in like spread decks or again for like a boss for game situation, but more so spread decks. Then Lily's Pokédoll. This is probably one of the weirdest cards in GLC in general, at least trainers, and it says you play it as like a basic Pokemon that's colorless, that's 30 HP, but it's colorless when it's in play, but it can be played in any GLC deck. And then it doesn't give any prizes when knocked out. It also can't retreat, and then you can like shuffle it back into your deck if it's in the active. It can kind of be, it's just used to buy turns, really, buy a turn. It can by getting knocked out. It can be used again for that shuffling back into your deck thing, or no, sorry, it gets put onto the bottom of your deck. It's a cool card, one that is like kind of fun to use, but not always something that gets good use either, but it's solid. Then we're going to move on to the supporters. The supporter cards are probably the most important cards in GLC, and unlike the regular TCG, there are less draw supporters. There, of course, are some that are in standard, and some that, there's like N, which you can't play in live, but then there's only a few that are in the or in the Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield era. Barney, essentially, it's like Judge, but a little bit stronger. You got Cynthia, which is Shuffle Draw 6, which is pretty good. Cole's Experiment's definitely weaker than these other two. Barney and Cynthia I'd recommend for almost any deck. Cole's Experiment is like pretty solid. Looking at the top 5, put 3 into your hand, put the others into the Lost Zone. Obviously, if you're playing Lost Zone based deck, this is an auto include. If you're not, it's probably not something you're playing, but you see a good chunk of cards. Lost Zoning 2 cards out of 5 usually isn't that bad for you. That's not awesome either. And then getting 3 out of your top 5 is pretty good. It's not an insanely strong supporter, but it's it's in that second tier. It's not bad either. And we have the search supporters. The search supporters, I think I miscentered that. Well, or maybe I'm missing one. Well, that one isn't in the video, so I'm talking about it. But we have a bunch of search supporters. These allow you to we'll search for cards, right? Most of them search for Pokemon. I'm trying to figure out which one I missed, but I don't know what it is, and I don't feel like finding it later. It's probably not very important. But we have a bunch of really cool ones here. Most of them, search for Pokemon, or a lot search for Pokemon. Airzu, Gloria, Sonia, and then like Frozican, that's part of it. Then a lot of them search for trainers as well, like Skyline Peony, and then Green's Exploration as well. Gooseman Hala is pretty unique here. It's also very similar to Colossus Tenacity, and it allows you to search for special energy, stadiums, and tools. Special energy can be really important in GLC, though with double colorless energy and twin energy being banned, they're a little less important, I guess. Also, you can't play double dragon, so there's some things that make this worse, but it's still a very good card. And Guzman Hala is the first tag team we're taking a look at, and it is very good. Then we have Ball Guy. Ball Guy is a supporter card that lets you search for 3 cards, item cards with a ball in their name. So the ball search cards we talked about earlier, not all of them have ball in their name. It does include Hisuian Heavy Ball, though. Hisuian Heavy Ball, again, isn't exactly a true ball card, which is actually good for Ball Guy. It's a card you can search out and get some value out of. And yeah, it's just a pretty good card. Overall, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of these, but some are good. Realistically, they're all pretty good. You need to kind of figure out which one you like. I'm not going to dive into them too much right here. Obviously, if you have basics, or if you have like a lot of evolutions, Airzu could be good. If you have a lot of basics that you really want on the board, Gloria could be good. There's also Bridget, which is like Gloria. Just kind of look at it and see like what you need. There's also a lot more. There's like so many of these, and generally they're pretty bad in standard. Almost none of these cards were good in standard, but still they are like really good in standard. Not usually in that like top tier of supporter, maybe in that second tier, but regardless, these are much more important in GLC. Next set of cards are the utility supporters. These utility supporters do other things. These are ones that, again, they do a bunch of different things. Peonia and Gladion allow you to look at your prizes. Peony, you look at half of them, or you look at 3 of them, and then can swap stuff out with your hand. It's pretty solid. And there's Gladion letting you look at all of them, and then you swap one with Gladion. It's like a Hisuian Heavy Ball, but for any card, but it is a supporter. Gladion is personally a card I recommend in most GLC decks. Personally, though, I know a lot of people aren't massive fans of it. A lot of people like the card Town Map. You can't play Town Map in live. You can play Daisy's Help, which is pretty similar. Um, Town Map can have some kind of weird interactions as well. I'm not gonna lie, because it like flips them over. But they Pokemon remove that because it has weird interactions. Um, so presumably that's it's not coming back to standard if anyone wants that. Sorry to say, you never know. It could, but the Peonia and Gladion are really solid inclusions. Again, some people like Peonia a lot. I am definitely more of a Gladion person. They are certainly different cards as well. And they can also kind of get you set up as well because you see some extra cards and can put them into your hand and then can kind of essentially use it as like a pseudo draw supporter. Then you have Guzma here. Guzma is actually probably the best card in GLC. Maybe, I'm not really sure, but it's boss's orders, but you switch. It's like prime catcher, but a supporter. It's really good, right? You Gus is really important. It's better than Boss Orders. Boss Orders is arguably the best card in standard. So, Guzma is really, really, really good. This is like broken. I mean, I wouldn't say so, but it's very good. It should realistically be in almost every GLC deck unless you have some weird reason to not have it there. Acerola is a pretty interesting supporter here, putting a Pokemon with damage on it into your hand, and you keep the cards attached. So it's better than scooping that in that regard. You keep the energy, no, you don't keep it attached. They go to your hand, obviously. The Pokemon's not in play anymore. The energy and the tools. So Acerola is like cool. I'm not a big Acerola fan. I'm like kind of neutral on it, but I think it's all right. Definitely a card that can be nice if you're kind of looking to tank, but it's a little. I don't know if I'd say niche, but your Pokemon aren't always surviving, and if they're never surviving, then you don't get any value out of it. Then Mallow is a pretty interesting supporter here. It's a switch, and then you also can discard 2 more to heal 120 to the Pokemon you switched out. It can be pretty solid against the another one of those tag teams. It's probably the third best of them. I'm not sure which is the best. Guzman Hala is probably more explosive, and the other one that we're going to talk about is really nice. It's pretty well rounded, pretty good. Mallow is a solid supporter card. Definitely, it can get big healing, which can be really huge. And then the switches also can be really huge. So Mallow is definitely, a really, really solid supporter. Lieutenant Surge's strategy is a really weird one, letting you, if you're down on prices, play 3 supporters this turn, including this one. So you play 2, essentially. It can be nice. It's kind of weird. It has certain synergies, but it's a pretty cool card and can lead to some pretty crazy turns. Then Lusamine here recovers 2 in a combination of supporters or stadiums from your discard into your hand. It's mostly used for supporters, but if you have a deck built around stadiums, then Lusamine can be crazy. And in other decks, it's still very good. You kind of need to turn off to use it, or you can pair it with Lieutenant Surge's strategy. But it is a very strong supporter, I guess. I mean, it was banned and expanded at one point. Then Silene, you'd flip 2 coins, and then you get 1 card back from your discard onto the top of your deck for each head, so it can recover anything. It does have that double coin flip aspect, which makes it worse, obviously. But it still is it's a pretty good card, I guess. It's one that I personally would not play really because of the coin flip, and the inconsistencies there. But it is still a pretty good card and can be really clutch. Then Clara's a recovery supporter. It's pretty similar to Lana's Aid. It's the same difference between Super Rod and Ordinary Rod for GLC. Lana's Aid is worse than standard, but Clara allows you to recover 2 Pokemon, 2 basic energy. So pretty solid there. The last set of cards here are what I have as the multi-purpose supporters. These draw/search and also have some secondary effect. These are pretty cool supporters in GLC. We got Birdkeeper and Tate and Liza. They each have a switch aspect. Birdkeeper switches, and then if you did switch, you draw 3 cards. Birdkeeper is a really solid supporter here. Tate and Liza, you can either switch or shuffle draw 5. Obviously, just using the supporter as a switch is like kind of bad because there's items that are switches. And shuffle draw 5 is kind of weak, but it is a pretty solid supporter. I'm personally not I'd say I'm like middle of the road on Tate and Liza. I know there are so many people who love Tate and Liza. I think it's like pretty good. It's not an insane draw supporter or insane switch supporter, but again, it's multi-purpose. Birdkeeper also does not draw cards if you cannot switch. So keep that in mind. Birdkeeper is a little sketchy in my opinion, but good as well. It's very strong when it's working. It's similar to Surfer as well. It's a very similar card there. Then you have Cynthia and Caitlin, which I kind of alluded to earlier. You put a supporter from your discard back into your hand, and then you discard a card from your hand and draw 3. Cynthia and Caitlin is a really solid supporter. It can be used as a draw. It can be used as recovery. It's not insane in either. It does discard as well, which is like kind of nice or kind of bad. It obviously depends, but Cynthia Caitlin is a really solid, well-rounded supporter. In my opinion, I was gonna say the most well-rounded supporter in the game. I'm not really sure exactly what that means, but I'll say that. Then we have Raihan. Raihan's really good, letting you can only play if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn, like Rosa, which I didn't really touch on too much. It's similar, but Raihan's probably better. No, Raihan's definitely better than Rosa. It accelerates the base guarantee for me to discard 20 of your Pokemon. Um, it's probably like the best universal energy acceleration in GLC. I mean, there are like double energies, notably twin, because those got banned, which are good, I guess, but that's kind of different, right? The Raihan, though, is really good and really insane. It searches for any card. Again, can only be played if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn, and also only if you accelerate the energy. If you can't, then you can't search. Yeah, I guess if you can't search, you can still play it. I have never had that happen, but I guess you could. But yeah, it's a really, really strong supporter. Then there's Avery. Avery is not a really strong supporter, but I know there are people who like it. I personally think it's kind of terrible. Honestly, I think it's the worst card in this video. What it does is you draw 3, and then if you drew any cards in this way, your opponent discards Pokemon from their bench until they have 3. I guess it's better in GLC than it is in Standard, I guess. Or when it was in Standard. I thought this was when it was in Standard, I thought this was like unplayably bad. And I saw people play it, and people played against me, and I was really happy whenever they did because it allows, if you're Avery'd, then you can discard your Pokemon with damage on them, or Pokemon that are just used for on-play abilities, and then just play them again. So that's really good. And generally, I don't play decks with huge benches, I guess, or maybe I play decks where I play a lot of one-time use abilities. But anyways, Avery can disrupt your opponent. It can help him though. Draw 3 isn't like super good. Cynthia Caitlin and Birdkeeper are both draw 3, and they're like solid, but they're certainly not just there for the draw. And then Professor Kukui here is but if you want to play Avery, then you could, I guess. And then Professor Kukui here, you draw 2, and then you do 20 more damage to your opponent's active. That's pretty solid there. It's nothing insane. 20 extra damage though is pretty solid, especially without Muscle Band in the format, because it's too old. And then well, the draw 2 is like obviously not super impressive, but it's all right. But tell me down below what's your favorite trainer that I talked about in this video. If I underrated some, if you think that Avery is actually secretly broken, or if there are cards I didn't talk about as well in this video. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.